All right, good evening. My name is Deputy Chief LaRon Armstrong of the Oakland Police Department, and tonight I wanted to go live and talk to you about our 2019 annual Stop Data Report. Today we released it publicly, and I wanted to come on Facebook Live just to have a conversation, take some questions, and talk to you about the continuous progress that we're making here at the Oakland Police Department. We understand that traffic stops are very important to our community, and the racial disparities that come along with the data that we've released over the years, I'm sure has caused some serious concerns. And so we just want to reassure the public that we are continually analyzing this data. We'll continually look to come up with innovative strategies to continue to reduce racial disparities. But also today, we just want to make sure the public knows that we continue to see reductions in our stops. We continue to see reductions in our disparities. And so that's encouraging. The practice of precision-based policing and intelligence-led stops is really beginning to be indoctrinated into our culture, that officers are focused on who's involved in criminal activity and not just going into communities, stopping everybody. So we at the Oakland Police Department understand the history of police in our community. And this strategy is really designed to continually look to increase trust, to make sure that our community understands that we want to do police work in a legitimate fashion, in a constitutional fashion, and in a just manner. So tonight, I'll be taking questions. I'll talk about some of the highlights from the data. And for those that tune in, we will take a couple questions. But I just wanted to spend a minute because this is a very important subject to talk about. When you talk about the stopping of people, when you talk about police action in our community, you want to make sure that there's checks and balances. So the state, the state mandated that the Oakland Police Department and every law enforcement agency in the state of California begin to collect data starting in 2019. The Oakland Police Department had been collecting data for many years previously, and we've always collected more than what was mandated for us to collect. And so what you'll see in our data report is you'll see much more data categories. You'll see a much more robust list of data and breakdown of data. And so we believe that it's our way of showing the community that we are consistently analyzing our data to make sure we understand what actions our officers are taking in our community every day and making sure those actions are in line with our direction. So in the year 2019, the Oakland Police Department made a total of 14,644 stops total. That is a 36% decrease from our previous year in 2019. We also reduced our stops of African Americans by 3,408 stops. That's a reduction of 45%. We also made some reductions in our stops of our Hispanic community. Slight, but still a reduction of 600, a little over 680 stops. Over the past 3 years, the Oakland Police Department and its high level of focus has led to a tremendous overall stop reduction in footprint. In 2015, the Oakland Police Department made 38,019 stops. And so for us to have made it to a point where we see that the department this year made 14,644, that to me shows tremendous progress. Just hope that you understand that this is not enough. This is not the end for us. We'll continue to analyze our data, continue to keep our officers focused, and we'll continue to bring down our disparity.
Chief, let me hop in here really quick with you here. I know OPD is the only department in the state to collect Intel-led stop data. What does that mean?
So Intel-led is really something that was started in the Oakland Police Department in 2016, and really we demand that our officers have information prior to making a stop. knowledge that the person that we're stopping has some connection to criminal activity. We want our officers to be focused. With the level of violence that we see in Oakland, we know that our officers have information that they can follow up on. We want our stops to be focused around criminal activity and not just randomized making stops. And so you'll see that intelligence-led is not practiced by any other department, and our intelligence-led stop rate continues to increase over the last 3 years since we've been doing it.
Okay, let me ask you another question here. We're going to give you an opportunity to ask questions if you like. If you can just type them in the chat, we will be looking at the questions there to give the Deputy Chief. But Chief, also, you're born and raised here. So can you give us an idea of what it was like when you were younger, what it was like when you were a young officer, to now, how the progression has actually happened?
Yeah. Being an African-American man born and raised in Oakland, you obviously don't have a lot of trust in law enforcement, that you fear law enforcement in some ways. And we've heard that. I experienced that myself. And so I say that reducing footprint means that the department is touching less people. So when we talk about reducing from 38,000 stops in 2015 to currently 14,000 stops, that's really shrinking the number of people that we're actually interacting with. The first entry into the criminal justice system starts with that stop, right? That traffic stop, that pedestrian stop. And the mere fact that we can stop 24,000 less people over a 4-year period shows the department understands the impact that law enforcement can have on community, and that negative impact that can cause in a community is something that has a tremendous impact on trust and the ability for people to have trust and confidence in us. And so as a young man growing up here, you fear law enforcement. And to think that now as a police department is thinking about how we can make less stops, I think is a very valuable thing.
Did you bring that into the department with your own personal knowledge, your own personal incidents that may have happened or that you may have seen happen to your friends or whatever? Because like I said, you were born here, so you've seen this department for several years. You're not that old, but several years.
Yeah. Well, I think when you're somebody from Oakland, you understand the challenges that we face in our community, right? The level of violence that we sometimes see in certain communities, and you want to be able to have confidence that when you need the police or when the police are in your community, that you're not going to be on the other side of a stop, particularly when you're not involved in any criminal activity. And so really I brought that into policing when I joined the Oakland Police Department, is that I wanted people to feel like there's a job for police officers to do to help keep our community safe, but we wanted to make sure that we weren't impacting everybody, that we were making sure for those that are in our community that just want to live their normal lives and go to and from, that they're not engaged by law enforcement, unless it's in a positive way. And so that's really what informed me about how I wanted to do, make changes to the department. And that really led to my, talking about this intel-led. And so I really want to thank Stanford and Dr. Eberhard and her team, because working with the researchers from Stanford was a really big help in understanding the impact of those large number of stops that we were making in previous years.
You said you're working with researchers, but before we get to that, explain to me, we said 45% down in African Americans, 30% down overall, but what are you actually doing to make those numbers to go down, and what are you going to do to make sure those numbers continue on that downward spiral, because I know this is just not enough?
Yeah, so what we're doing at the police department is taking that rich data and looking at it every single month. Every single month we conduct a risk management meeting where we look at the stops of all of our officers, really looking at why they made the stop, who they stopped, looking at the racial breakdown of those that they stopped and had interactions with, and determining whether their stops was in line with our direction. We want to recalibrate officers when they're making stops that's not in line with our direction to make sure that we limit that impact, right? Limit that potential harmful impact it can have on our community. And that's something that we take seriously. That's something that's built into the fabric of the department, is not only collecting data, but analyzing data. I believe that there's a lot of departments that collect data, but there's very few that actually take the time to analyze that data and look at their officers' activity, right, to determine what is driving your need to make stops and making sure that that's consistent with not only the values of the department, but the values of our community. And
you said you're working with some researchers. What does working with the researchers, how does that help?
Well, you know, bringing in Stanford in 2015 was really important for the department to allow academics to come in and provide us some insight and analysis on our stop data and give us recommendations on how we can improve. I'm happy to say, and you'll see as a part of this report, is that Stanford, at the conclusion of their research and analysis, they produced 50 recommendations that the department could implement to help improve trust and reduce footprint, reduce the number of stops that we make in our community. I can say now that the department has completed and implemented all 50 of those recommendations. And so really that was our effort to not only work with researchers, but also take the recommendations of researchers and implement those recommendations to help improve the way we police our community.
And we're going to wrap it up here really quickly because we know you have more things to do. But tell me once again, we said the numbers are where they are now, but that's still not enough. There's a lot more work to be done.
Yeah, these numbers are good. And we've seen declines year after year over the last 3 years, but it's still not enough. The fact that we still have a disparity in stops of African Americans is something that we will continue to work on, that we'll continue to do thorough analysis, we'll continue to question our officers' actions to make sure they're in line with our direction, and to make sure that our community feels safe, but also feels that their department is policing its community in a constitutional fashion, that we're practicing just policing, that we're practicing procedurally just policing, that people know that we want to police our community, but we want to do it in a way that's respectful.
All right, Chief. Thank you very much. We'll have more conversations with the chiefs as we use Facebook Live more in the future, but is there anything else you would like to say to the community?
No, I just thank the community for those that tuned in and took a minute to hear what I had to say today around our release of this report. I say to you that it's not a time for us to celebrate. It's a time for us to continue to commit to our community, that we're going to continue to improve and do better and continue to see these numbers go down.
Thank you very much.